Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast today. So I'm delighted to be joined by a thriving adoptee. You know, we have lots of adoptive parents, but you're in for a treat, guys. This is Vin. Welcome to the show, Vin.
Hi, Simon. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. Apart from the domestic things that I just shared with you. Listeners, I've got a little bit on my mind this morning. We may have to dig up all our flooring to find a leak in our central heating. So I'm on the edge. I'm on the edge of all that practical nightmare. And this conversation with Ben is a delightful kind of distraction.
We'll use that as inspiration. We can use those pipes for inspiration for.
So, Vin, could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Yes. Well, hi everyone. I'm Vin. I am from Australia. I'm originally from India. I was adopted from India when I was 10 months old, and I got adopted by an Australian Dutch family, and I'm 33, and life has been anything but easy. And I think, you know, I'm definitely not the only one that can say that. Everyone's life is difficult at times. I am a thriving adoptee. I have my ups and downs, like everyone, a bit like those water pipes.
Yeah.
But I like to. I'm a photographer in my spare time. Sorry, I should say I'm a photographer in my spare time. I do a lot for the adoption community. What else would you like to know? I had a great childhood. We can maybe dive deeper into that.
Yeah, before we dive into the childhood stuff, I just want to talk about thriving adoptees and up and down, you know? So,
yep.
And the fact that everybody has a tough time. We all have a tough time.
Yes.
And somehow, so I just want to talk, sorry about that little break. I just want to talk about this idea of thriving adoptees and up and down, and the fact that everybody has a tough time. I think that I heard a fantastic mentor of mine say that the trick to life is being grateful for the highs and graceful in the lows. And, you know, we've got this, another mentor talks about amotophobia, and the fact that we struggle about struggling, you know, so we struggle with struggling. And if we can be graceful in the lows, then life gets a lot easier. And this is particularly pertinent for me, for a guy who's done a lot of kind of personal development stuff. It's that I do all this personal development. I did all this personal development, and then I'm feeling low, and then I beat myself up for feeling low. I worry about worrying, and then I worry about
that's natural. I think that's a very natural line of thinking and going through the emotions. And I mean, when I am struggling a lot, I do beat myself up more than I should. And I think that's a part of the natural healing process of dealing with things. One of my biggest things is I reflect a lot. And I've been told that my reflection ability is amazing. However, even though I do reflect on a lot of things, on everything. I've learned to reflect on everything pretty much. There might be moments of clarity for the next 24 hours, and then I'll go backwards again, and then I'll beat myself up again. And so it's a bit like tug of war with yourself. And you say, I love that analogy that you said before about the being graceful and thankful, not thankful, grateful. I will have to say one of the biggest things that annoys me in the adoption community is that word grateful, because it's been thrown around so much. You should be grateful for being adopted, and you should be grateful for what we've given you. And although that's a fantastic analogy that you said, that's something that really gets on my goat, because it is drummed into us. And I know quite a lot of adoptees have this similar feeling as well, is that it gets drummed to us that we should be grateful for what we were given, the life that we were given. And so I don't necessarily like that word grateful. I think thankful comes to mind. I'm certainly thankful for everything, all the opportunities that I've been given. But I'm not sure if I don't know if it sounds ungrateful to say that I'm not grateful. Does that make sense?
First thing is, I've seen that too. I've seen
and it's not my parents that have said you should be grateful. It's other people. When I would talk about just normal things that are going in my life, people would turn around and go, but aren't you grateful that they did that? Aren't you grateful that, you've had this opportunity, and grateful that you've been adopted? And I think to myself, huh? Like, I'm thankful. Yes, of course. But it's not, adoptees aren't put on this earth. Like, we weren't adopted to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for these adoptive parents that have given us the opportunities that we were given. We're thankful. And my parents know that I love them very dearly. And I speak very highly of my adoptive family. And it's just that word,
Yeah. That's interesting, because that there was, it comes from a guy, the quote comes from a guy called George Pransky, who has nothing to do with the adoption community at all.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I've not. Apart from the fact that his mentor, so this guy's in his 80s, right? But his mentor was a guy called Sid Banks, who was adopted, right?
Yeah.
But didn't focus on the adoptee community at all. So it's perhaps he was talking about being grateful for being, not for grateful for being adopted, but for grateful for being in a good mood.
Yeah. Oh, of course. It's I suppose being an adoptee, just that word, I associate it with, I should be grateful for being adopted, for having the opportunities that were given to me by my adoptive family. And and I completely understand what you're trying to say. However, that word particularly has just been thrown at me in such a different way.
It's a tricky word, so it kind of leads me to the next question. Well, if I can take a step back on it, it's really, it seems to me to be a tricky word, because it's somebody trying to impose their thoughts on us, and that is not good in any scenario. So like when somebody's trying to sell us something, somebody's trying to change our mind, somebody's people, there's a fundamental mismatch. So if somebody who is really struggling, and then somebody, like an adoptee that's really struggling to them, and then somebody says, well, you should be grateful. It's the polar opposite of empathy. It's antipathy. It's antipathy or it's seen as that. And that's why it hurts so much, because we all as human beings want to be understood.
Yeah.
And if somebody tells us, says that we should be grateful about being adopted, and you think, well, what right have they got? And that it can send us down a
spiral.
A vortex, a spiral or a vortex, and it can send us spiraling down. The ultimate thing for me, though, is that if I'm waiting for the world to agree with me before I can feel good,
you're going to be waiting a while.
If I'm waiting for the world not to knock me, if I'm waiting for the world to change their opinions of adoptees before I can feel good, or if I'm going to let the world, or if I'm inadvertently, I'll say I'm not going to do this on purpose, but if I'm waiting for all that for the world to change before I can be at peace, then I'm going to be in for a really long wait.
There is no right time for the right time. It just doesn't exist.
What do you mean, Ben?
So, when people say, I'm waiting for the right time to tell someone something. Well, when is the right time? There's always going to be, I spent years waiting for the right time to leave something that I was stuck in. When was the right time? And then it became about, pull the Band-Aid off, just do it. There is no right time. So if you're waiting for the right time to say something or do something, there is no right time. The right time is now. That is the right time.
Yeah. And we can go quite philosophical from this. I think that we're raised to believe I'll be happy, pleased, relieved, delighted, whatever. I'll be happy when X. So,
that's because we've been taught to wait. We've been taught to, as kids, we got to wait till next weekend to go to the park. We got to wait till your birthday to get your presents. We got to wait, so we're constantly conditioned to waiting. We book appointments, so we got to wait. We have surgeries, we got to wait. It's everything. Life is about waiting, but it's life is now, because life doesn't wait. Time doesn't wait. My biggest thing about life in general is time. The thing I struggle with is time, because it's the one thing you can't mess with. It doesn't wait. It doesn't stop. It doesn't pause. You can't rewind it. That is the biggest thing I think I'm afraid of, because you cannot finagle it at all. And if you wait for something, then you're going to be postponing that thing for you, and it's not going to affect anyone else, because everyone still keeps moving onwards.
Yeah. So I'm waiting until my boiler's working to be happy.
Well, there are some things where you have to wait. That's inevitable.
The only time that we can feel anything is right now, though, right? We can.
Oh, of course, that's right, because you've got to be in the moment when you feel it. You can't predict that you're going to feel something later on. I am like the biggest ironic thing that I've said, I think, today. One of the biggest things is that we stress, like going back to what you said before, we stress and we worry about worrying. We think about what we may think about and how we may feel about that ahead of time before we actually feel it. And that stops us a lot from doing a lot of things.
So one of the things I learned from another mentor of mine is that, we're, as you say, we're conditioned. I'll be happy when,
Yep.
and we're conditioned to that as kids, and we're conditioned to believe that, I think, one of the things I see is it's not really spoken about as big in such abstract, in such concrete terms. I'll be happy when I find my birth mother, or I'll be happy when people accept me for being adopted, or I'll be happy when, it's all a big delaying. It's delayed gratification, isn't it? It's delayed happiness. But
I think it's the universal excuse.
A universal excuse. I love that.
Everyone uses it all over the world. I'll be happy when.
Yeah. Have they not heard of Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now?
Exactly.
Like, I read that book 12 years ago, and it did have a profound effect on me. However, not so profound that I don't get cheesed off when my central heating isn't working.
Oh, look, I'm all about the peaceful warrior, and the time is now as well. However, in that moment, you're like, well, F the time. I want it now. I want to do this now. There's times to focus on them now and be calm, and then there's times like when your pipes burst and it sends you into a bit of a haywire. It's situational. I think it's very situational.
Getting into my stuff. I love that. So, did you say the peaceful warrior or the peaceful warrior?
Yes, it's based on a true story. Dan Millman, who was a gymnast who his whole life wanted to win the gold medal, and he shattered his leg in a motorbike accident. And anyway, his own intuition made up a inspiring character, and it then helped him get back up on the horse, so to speak, and get back up on the rings and train. And anyway, he went on to, I think, win a gold medal. But yeah, the doctors said that he would never be a gymnast ever again because he shattered his leg, and it was medically impossible, and he did the impossible. And that movie, The Peaceful Warrior, it changed my life. It was very powerful, very powerful. It teaches you about listening to your own intuition and teaches you about being in the now, like what you were saying. And, never say nothing is ever going on, because if you stop and pause and look around, there's things in the background going on all the time you don't even realize. So you got to stop and pause. I think that was the whole point, the time. And like you said, the time is now. The past is in the past and gone. 5 minutes ago was the past, and 5 minutes ahead is the future. And one word that I like to use a lot is perspective. Everything is about life, is about perspective.
It is. I love the word perspective too. And one of the questions that runs through my head is, if my life has been up and down, and it has, and the fact that it has been up and down, it doesn't change the fact that I'm a thriving adoptee. So
No.
I can be a thriving adoptee with my life going up and down, with my mood going up and down.
Again, I think it comes down to perspective. You know, you've taken the upside to things and said, you know what, I'm not going to let this rule my life. I'm not going to let this drag me down. Yes, you have up and down times, but we all have up and down times. And you got to focus on the positives. At the moment, I'm going through a little bit of a funk. So my down times are a lot louder than my up times. And I think one of the biggest things that you have to keep focus on when, you know, you are in those down times is the positives. And even though it might be quite difficult to see that there are any positives, you need support from people around you, and you need sometimes to look back and look at how far you've come. And someone important said to me the other day, 1%, don't try and do 100%, try and do 1% each day. And that was huge, because then it was almost like you're not putting pressure on yourself to be that 100% every single day, even if you know, you just do that 1%, and it almost takes off 99% with pressure and releases the valve and go, okay, so if I fall or fail, that's okay. I've at least achieved 1%. I didn't have to achieve the full 100% because I've achieved 1%.
Yeah. For me, I'm always trying to find ways to express this as simply and as briefly as I possibly can. So what I'm talking about here is not identifying myself with my mood.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah. Well, imagine like an x-axis and a y-axis.
Yeah.
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 Like a graph.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my okayness is not related to my mood.
Oh, okay. Yep. Sorry. Getcha.
Two independent variables. Does that make sense?
That makes sense now. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm okay. I'm okay, whatever my mood.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
So I am grateful for the highs and grateful for the lows.
Mm-hmm.
I am not my highs and I am not my lows.
So you got your mood.
I'm not my mood. I'm not my mood. Whereas my mood used to determine my mood. So and my self-worth. So
if you were angry, then you were angry. But now it's like if you feel angry, you're not just that.
Yeah. I feel angry.
Yeah. It's a feeling.
Being angry.
Yeah.
Between two. And that's the exploration. That's letting the emotions out and letting the emotions in and not trying to squash them and not trying to, you know, as I said, I'm on the edge. I'm on the edge of distraction about this central heating. You know, I keep going back to it because I'm on the edge of it. So 15 years ago, I would have been going absolutely spare about the fact that my central heating isn't working. I would have cancelled this recording. I would have said, no, I've got to solve this now. I've got to ring 15 plumbers. I can't be doing with this. I've got to ring 15 plumbers till I find somebody that can come tomorrow. My life is on hold until I can get my central heating. And I'd be I'm just using this as a nice example to play around with, because it's easier to do it for me with the simple stuff like this.
Yeah.
Or then I would be I'm beating myself up. And then my wife might say, well, why are you so upset about the central heating, Simon? Because you've been on all these personal development courses. Why are you letting it get to you? Right. So,
yeah.
And that would be pulling my strings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always like,
that would maybe making me evil. And so I'd be annoyed with her for doing that. And then I'd be annoyed.
Yeah.
Then I'd be annoyed about the fact that I was annoyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like you've come a very long way.
And I've got a long way to go.
And that's right. We never stop learning until the day we die. I think I know myself. I put myself in this category a lot. I want things to magically fix overnight. I'll have moments of clarity, and then I'll wake up and I'll be like, yes, okay, it's all magic. And I want everything to, magically be all right today, because yesterday was a shit day. Today was a good day because I've sorted it out yesterday. And then the day will go on and I won't feel as good as I thought I would have after those moments of clarity. And then I'll kind of go backwards, and then, it'll start a bit of a spiral vortex thing. But then I'll get reminded of that 1%. And where I'm going with this is that I think as humans, we think that it's okay to force ourselves to be perfect all the time, but we're not perfect all the time. We're not perfect at all, really. We're imperfectly perfect.
I love that. Imperfectly perfect. Because there's this there's this voice in, I've done all my learning exploration of this stuff outside of the adoption community, right? So I know that I thought not being good enough, I thought like us guys I thought we had the monopoly on that. Yeah.
No. It doesn't matter what you identify with, it that will hit anyone. It's yes, no. I often feel times of not enough. It's inevitable, I think.
Not good enough is a song that's playing in everybody's head. Everybody. Yeah. But as adoptees, we've got incontrovertible evidence.
I think so. And one of the biggest things that I stress as well, in one of the groups that I run, is that you don't have to be adopted just to feel certain things. Like, for instance, the attachment disorder, that doesn't just affect adoptees, that affects children of parents who have been divorced, kids who have lost their parents at a young age, not necessarily through adoption. There are all different reasons why people form attachment disorders, and these issues aren't specific to adoptees. And I think a lot of I have definitely had some adoptees turn around to me and say, "Are you sure you're adopted? Because you seem to think that you don't have this and this doesn't affect you." And like, for instance, the primal wound, when I first came into the adoption community, I had no idea what the primal wound was. And, for adoptees who think they haven't experienced the primal wound, any emotion towards the birth parents, either negative or positive, is a symptom of being affected by the primal wound. And I didn't really understand that until I had gone through quite a rigorous time in the adoption community, and I was able to learn and grow. And I started out as a very, very positive, happy adoptee in the adoption community. And now I'm more neutral because I understand things. And going back to what you were saying before, when people try and almost convince you to think one thing, there's a lot of convincing going on in the adoption community where I suppose you would call them woke adoptees to the primal wound and to all the adoption trauma, would say to the adoptees who I suppose are on the lighter side of I've had a great adoption and don't really think about the negative aspect to adoption, they almost convince them or force them to try and see the negative. And if they don't see the negative, then they label you in the fog and then kind of move you along. And it's quite daunting if you've never experienced that before. And the primal wound is real. However, you don't have to drum that in and force that into people's mind. I think it's myself, I didn't think I was affected by the primal wound until it was pointed out to me that even having anger towards my birth mother was a consequence of the primal wound. So you grow and you learn, and it's just something that it's a part of life. We grow as we get older, and we take different things in, and yeah.
I've done a few podcasts about the primal wound, and I think it's fascinating. My view is so counter to most people's that it often gets people's backs up.
In what sense?
It annoys them.
Oh, I get that, but what annoys them? What in reference?
It's what you said. It's kind of what you said.
Yeah.
But a turbocharged version of what you said.
The adoptees who are woke to the primal wound, do I feel, because, and I can say this because I've been on the receiving end of this argument, very forceful, very, very, very forceful, and you kind of don't get a word in, and it's shoved down your throat until you eventually sort of put your hands up and surrender and go, okay, all right, I believe you. And they're trying to convince you that you experience the same thing as they do. But what they don't understand is that everyone's different and everyone feels it differently. And everyone is at a different stage of in their life. And who determines who's in the fog or not? Everyone's at a different stage. And everyone's at a different level of understanding as well. And, forget about the adoption stuff. Let's talk about life in general. Everyone's at a different stage. So when you add into the adoption stuff, that's more complexity on top of complexities. And a lot of adoptees are focused on adoption trauma and nothing else in their life because their adoption trauma has and is being one of the biggest focuses in their life because it stopped them living, because they feel a pull to it and they can't shake it. Whereas other adoptees, I think the so-called happy adoptees, why they get labeled happy adoptees is because they can function with the adoption trauma and not focus on it. And I think that's what a lot of the, I suppose, two sides are, is the ones that can deal with it. And I suppose it's probably a very unpopular opinion, but this is just my opinion, is that I believe that it's the ones that can focus with the adoption trauma are the ones that isn't being ruled by it. And therefore, I think the ones that are being ruled by it hate the ones that aren't. And I think that's where the anger comes from. And a lot more things are added in there, of course. But, I don't think it's just that, but it's just my opinion, very popular opinion.
So it's fascinating stuff.
I think I just signed my death warrant there. But it's it's something that I strongly believe in. This is why I run a group that helps educate prospective and adoptive parents, and it's led by a team of adoptees, because I strongly believe in order to adoption, I suppose in a perfect world it wouldn't exist, but we're not in a perfect world. And there are a lot of adoptees out there advocating for adoption to be abolished. And I think to myself, okay, well, what happens if adoption's abolished? What about all the ones that have been adopted, or or the ones that are sitting in the orphanages? What happens to those children? And what happens to the older children? And and I think, well, I don't necessarily agree with infant adoptions. I don't understand why parents want infants as children. There's a demand for infants, and I don't agree with that at all. And I don't agree with the money factor of adoption at all. And there's a lot of corruption and abuse and trafficking, and we can go down a whole portal of that. But I'm pretty sure there's every other podcast that talks about that. But it's what I do in this parent group is the adoptee team and we talk about all this stuff. We talk about the truth, and it's spoken about. It's not being thrown at the parents. It's not attacking the parents. It's one of our rules in the groups is if you attack a parent, you get kicked out, and only very limited adoptees can come into this group. And when they come into the group, they got to go through a whole rigmarole to come into the group. They got to go through video interviews and everything, because it's about respecting everyone, not just the parents respecting the adoptees or the adoptees respecting the parents. Everyone has to be respected, because that's the only way people learn. And this group is purely an educating group where the parents are educated by the lived experience of the adoptees.
So I want to take a step back a bit, because you've made this distinction between kind of those in the adoption world and those outside of the adoption world. And we've talked about the fact that I mentioned that adoptees don't have the monopoly on self-doubt, right? If what's the difference? And I've got an opinion on this, right? And I'd love to hear your opinion. What's the difference that makes the difference in the human condition?
I think it's what is being drummed into us. It's the outside factors and the influences that we have. I think it's all about influence.
Isn't what's going on inside us more important than what's going on outside us?
Well, it should be. But perfect example. For years, I struggled with whether I was gay or not, and whether to come out and say that I was gay. because society didn't let me. I would get bashed up because I looked gay. I hadn't even come out yet. I was petrified to come out, but I was being beat up because I looked gay. How does someone look gay? So it's we shouldn't let outside influence us and society influence us. But why would we have social media? I mean, social media is a perfect example of that. You know, we only put on social media what we want people to see. So everyone thinks our lives are perfect, but behind closed doors, it's a different story. You know, I think it is. Yeah.
Aren't feelings an inside job?
While they are, but it's outside influence that influences our feelings. I mean, if you say to me, I should feel good, well, I'm going to think inside, well, I should feel good, but do I? And then I think about the outer of my life and go, okay, maybe I've got this to feel good about, but you're telling me I should feel good. So
I'm not telling you anything, buddy.
But you know, I think it's the outside influence. I think that's a very powerful thing, and people underestimate that. But I think if people block that out, myself especially, if I blocked out outside influences, I think that I would be more influenced about my own self and inner self, and I think I would get further if I listened to my inner self than if I listened to the outer.
So, I'm conscious of going into kind of like coach or teacher mode here, right? So what? But I'm going to touch on it. I'm going to touch on it briefly, and I'm going to recommend a book if people are interested in exploring this, right? So the book is called The Inside Out Revolution by a guy called Michael New. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. It's been one of the sort of like the transformational pieces for in my life, seeing that, you know, the inside out revolution. So the world, it looks like the world is happening to us, but
yeah.
but but it isn't. Right. So the example. Yeah, I'm not going to go into an example. If people are interested in exploring that, it's been one of the bigger parts of the jigsaw on my learning journey. So our feelings come from our thoughts, not from the outside world, and most of the time we're not choosing what we think.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not choosing how we feel, and if we're not choosing, it's not our fault. So I'm not beating anybody up by saying, okay, you're feeling down. You shouldn't feel down because it's an inside job, and there's something wrong with you. So that's when most of the time, most of us aren't feeling. Most of the time, most of us aren't choosing how we think about ourselves, how we feel, what we do, because of the conditioning that we had as kids. So you talk about the outside influences, and I think that they are, we as kids, we're like sponges. So we suck up the good, and we suck up the good, and we suck up the bad, and that becomes our map of that becomes our map of the world. It's from our family, from our school, from our peers, from the outside world. We suck it all up.
Yeah.
And that's what the psychologists call the conditioning. And that's it's usually our conditioning that is choosing how we see ourselves, what we think, how we feel, and what we do. In a nutshell. So does that make any sense?
It does. I'm trying to follow. It does make sense.
I spent like 12 years looking at this stuff.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And the way that I look at it is that, our mood goes up and down. So I was adopted 54 years ago. So that's a past event. Most of the time I felt pretty good about that. I have had moments when I've not felt good about it. So so the event is in the past, and yet my feeling about it's a fixed event from the past and a variable feeling about it in the present. So a fixed event cannot cause a variable feeling.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think
cool.
I think any event in the past can affect you.
But it affects it. I'm talking about this, and it affects me variably. So
I'm
trying to think of an analogy.
No, I understand. I think I got it mixed up, but I understand. Yeah,
it was maybe a bit left brainy, a bit logical stuff. So if my heating's broken, it's broken.
Yeah,
that's it, broken. So if it was broken, if adoption had wounded me, had broken me, then I would have been broken all those years.
But I think a lot of adoptees feel like that, though.
Yeah, I'm just talking about my experience.
Yeah.
So what's wounded?
Within you.
No, I mean, the book's called The Primal Wound. So what's wounded?
For years, I had adoptees telling me about this book and how I should read this book, this wonderful book that gives wonderful insight to the adoptee primal wound. And I had adoptees just throw this book at me for years. And I finally got a hold of a copy and realized that it was written by an adoptive parent. And I thought to myself, hang on a sec. Adoptees were adamant at throwing this book at me because I, the adoptee, didn't understand about adoptee feelings and the primal wound. And these adoptees that are hounding me and bullying me are giving me a book written by an adoptive parent. Hang on, I'm a bit confused. So I read about 4 chapters. And I kind of stopped because, I mean, it's a lot of it. A lot of it, I think, is I'm sure if I read on, I would know this, but I'm not sure if the author Nancy's daughter was a domestic or international adoptee. By the sounds of what I read, she was a domestic adoptee. So therefore, a lot of it didn't apply to me because I'm an international adoptee. So there were things in there where I was like, oh, yes, I understand. But then there were things like other things where I'm like, nah, that doesn't apply to me. And it doesn't sound like she was of color either. So that also didn't apply to me. There was a lot of things that didn't apply to me in that book. So, you know, adoptees can throw that at other adoptees as a general rule of thumb, but that didn't apply to me. A lot of it didn't apply to me. General feelings may have. And it woke me up to a few things, but it wasn't like the holy Bible of adoption. I mean, it was well written, and Nancy does a fantastic job at understanding from an adoptive parent point of view of getting expert advice from other adoptees and observing her own adopted child. She does a fantastic job. But at the end of the day, she's not an adoptee.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all, because I have a lot of respect for Nancy, and she did a fantastic job at writing the book, and her other books as well are fantastic. But again, she's not an adoptee.
At first I thought I explained everything, and I actually did recommend it. I recommended it to my sister. I recommended it to a friend of mine who's adopted, because I thought it explained everything. And then I realized that in my opinion, it's not correct. It's not right. Because when I thought, in a nutshell, and it came to me with that question, I asked you a question, what's wounded? I asked myself that same question, and I thought, well, what's wounded? And I thought, sometimes adoption hurts my feelings. Okay, so definitely. So is that wounded? And then I thought, no, what's wounded is my sense of self, my sense of self. So what some people call the ego. But I'm not my ego. My ego is my sense of self. It isn't my true self. It's not who I truly am.
Yeah.
And who I truly am and who we truly are is it's unwoundable, because we are not things. We are not our bodies. So you can if I'm holding a pen up, right? But if this was not a knife, I could cut my arm and I'd be wounded, and I'd have to wait for it to heal. You know, I might put a sticky plaster on it. If it was really bad, I might go to the what the Americans call the ER, what we call A&E, accident emergency, and they might put some stitches on it, and over time it would heal, right? And then we clean it up so it didn't get affected. Off we went. But that's not who I am. I'm not my body. I'm the life force that animates that body. You know, so we've seen. I've been unfortunate enough to see my father-in-law after he died, and his life force wasn't there. The life force had gone somewhere else, and that life force, who we truly are, it's not a thing that can be wounded.
I think, you know, I would put that as, you know, we are not our labels. We are humans that are made up of all different aspects of who we are. You know, and when someone used to call me gay, it was like the biggest thing, where I'd be like, well, F you, because, you know, but then over time I thought, hang on, I am. Why? Because it was said to me in a derogatory term. but I didn't have to take it like that. I am not my label. I am, gay is just a part of who I am. I was born like that. I am a photographer as well. I am an adoptee as well. We are made up of all aspects of who we are. You know, there's a lot of things that make up a person. And, you know, you were right in saying that we are not our wounds. However, it's our wounds are how we grow, because we learn, we learn, we evolve. And I think I think it's more complicated than that, you know, like in terms of what you said. I think it's more complicated.
Yeah. And that's okay.
It's my
journey. We're all we've all got a different opinion.
Well, that's right. And it's healthy, I think, to have a different opinion. I think we'd all be boring if we all had the same opinion.
Did that just come across as patronising, Vin? I thought, was I being patronising there? Did I come across as patronising just then?
No, I don't think so.
Brilliant.
No, no, God, no. I think it's healthy to have your own opinion. You know, I came into the adoption community and it was almost like everyone had the same opinion. And if you didn't agree with that opinion, that blanket statement of adoption's wrong and adoption's bad, and then all of a sudden you didn't fit in. And I was like, hang on a sec. My adoption wasn't bad. I had a great adoption. I had a great family. And all of a sudden I found out that adoptees didn't talk to their adoptive parents anymore. And, you know, it was almost abnormal to have a healthy, loving relationship with your adoptive parents and family. And I thought, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was a thing. I go, all right. You know, it was very abnormal for me to know that there was issues. It just never occurred to me that people didn't have good adoptive families out there. But I had, prior to coming into the adoption community online, I wasn't friends with any adoptees. So I didn't know anything about it, to be honest. Like, I was very naive and very new to everything and learning about everything. And I was very naive when I first came in there. But I grew and I evolved and I became a thriving adoptee. I always was. But I got battered and bruised like every human, and I became thriving. I found where I fit in the adoption community, which is probably not where anyone else is. And I created my own platform because I didn't fit anywhere else. And, you know, I still struggle with people questioning my beliefs. And at the beginning, it was like, why are you questioning my beliefs? But now I'm like, well, you know what? You can question and I'll answer. It was almost like I got offended when people questioned my beliefs. Now I'm answering and giving an explanation on why I believe that.
Yeah. We used to have a show in the UK. It was a really silly show, a game show. And one of the little phrases that the host used to use was, "We have a difference of opinion, Jeffrey." Like, yeah, we have a difference of opinion. I went through the same thing as you. I didn't go through it. I was the same thing as you, but I was a little bit taken aback as well, because I've got a friend who's adopted. I've a few acquaintances over the years that I've met are adopted, but I don't hang around with adopted people, and so I wasn't familiar with all this, all these differences of opinions, and all these people trying to persuade one another of their their point of view. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very powerful. It's very, very powerful when you get a cohort of adoptees almost pressuring you to think the same as them, and if you don't, you're kicked out of, you know, the tent per se. And it is a very strong cloud, and I did get sucked in. For about 6 months, I was angry, and my mum turned around to me at one point and said, you know, you were brought up to be able to talk about adoption. Adoption was never a dirty word in our house. And now all of a sudden, she couldn't even mention the word adoption because it became a bad word because I was angry every time anyone mentioned it, you know. And it took me quite a lot to snap out of that because it was so powerful. The anger was powerful. But when I snapped out of it, I didn't understand what I was angry at. I think more so, I think I was angry at myself than anything.
Well,
I can't explain that because I don't understand it.
I think that we're because I had, so your being in that world took you down, and reading Nancy Verrier's book took me down. Mm-hmm. We both had we both went down due to for different reasons, and that's the nub for me. The determinant of how we are doing is our level, you know. Mm-hmm. So I talk about the metaphor I use for this is, imagine you know, you've been in you're in the sea, you're in a swimming pool, and you've got a beach ball, and you're pushing down on the ball, and it goes down, and it goes down underwater, and you push it down, and you keep on pushing it, and it goes down a foot underwater. Then you let go of it, and it leaps 2 foot up. It goes higher.
Yeah.
It goes higher. It jumps higher than you pushed it down.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what happened to you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. Yes. But it was, it happened in a very abrupt way for me. Very, very abrupt way. And I had to snap myself out of it. Otherwise it was going to kill me. What I went through was if it ever happened again, I will never go back to the adoption community ever again. Yeah. The reason why I did was because it was almost like I had something to prove, not to anyone else, to myself. I had something to prove to myself that they didn't tear me down. And it was through a lot of self-discovery, self-healing, and a lot of reflection that I got back up and went back into the adoption community after that happened. And you know, it is very powerful, the cloud of hate in the adoption community, and the people that understand are the adoptive parents, because they get the hate from the adoptees as well, and they get the adoptees attacking them. And to create a safe space for them and adoptees is very rare, because and that's where I feel I fit. I feel I fit in a space where adoptive parents can feel safe because they understand what it's like to get the crap thrown at them by adoptees. even though I'm an adoptee, I feel for the parents, because how are these parents going to learn if they just keep getting attacked? You can't learn. I don't know about you, but I can't learn being attacked. I just shut down and go, yep, see you later. I can't even hear what you're saying. So even though, and sorry, I keep going back to this group, but this is my platform where I feel safe in the adoption community. And I think people fear it because it is a safe space. Adoptees, I think, fear it because it is a safe space. And they prefer to believe that the adoptee team help adopters adopt. But that's not what we do in the group at all. It's just the adoptees educating the parents on their lived experience. That's all it is. And it's a safe space. And the adoptees can't come and attack the parents, and the parents can't come and attack the adoptees. So it is a safe space. So yeah, it is powerful. The anger is powerful. And when I was, this group's been running for 3 years, and I went through that change in this group, and I did start being a little bit dark in the group because I was discovering things that I didn't know. And I think that's what it is. It's self-discovery. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be happy too. That's what people are forgetting. It's okay to be happy. But I found that happy adoptees don't share their stories because no one wants to listen, because it's happy. Everyone wants to listen to the sad stuff. And I think, why? If you won a medal for a swimming carnival, wouldn't you want to go, hey, I want to show you my happiness. I want to show you what I've earned. Bad analogy probably, but you want to be able to share your happiness and excitement. And in this group, we also share the positive stuff as well. So it's a bit of a balance, A lot of the time it does sort of seesaw towards more the trauma talk, because that's the truth. Unfortunately, with adoption, trauma does trump it. However, we have a balance.
Yeah. So I'm going to put a link to the group in the show notes. Yeah, you want me to? Yeah.
Yes, awesome. That would be wonderful. If any adoptees do want to join the team, they will have to message me, because there is quite a process for the adoptees to come into the group to be a voice. However, in saying that, every adoptee voice is important, and every adoptee voice needs to be heard, and every story needs to be heard. Every voice is important. I just want to stress that, just because, the reason why we turn adoptees away is because and it's myself and another team member that interviews the adoptees, if we think that the adoptee can't come into the group and educate and rather just attack the parents, that's why they get turned away. That's the only reason why we turn away adoptees, is because we feel like they won't be able to respect the parents.
Yeah, I think that's we talked about this on the podcast before with other and it was before I found you. I think that what you're doing is really needed, because most of nobody else that I've come across is creating this balanced educational view with the amount of diligence. That's a really posh word for me to use, diligence. You put in a lot of care. You're putting up. You're making people. You're making sure that people are right for your community before adoptees are right for your community before you join them, and adopters and adoptees, and no one else seems to be kind of doing that.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of groups out there that do educate the parents, and some parents like, I suppose, the fights and the being told what to do. there is a little bit of don't do this. And, for example, I put up a question to the parents of, what if your adoptee came home and said, F you, I don't want to know you, and I want to go live with my birth parents? What would you do? And a lot of the responses were, I would want to sit down with my adoptee and know why, and understand them, and talk to them, and see what we can do to help, and to see if that's possible. That's great. Absolutely fantastic way of dealing with that, and we throw questions at the parents all the time. And, we have a policy in the group that we don't talk about the process of adoption in the sense of where to adopt or how much or anything like that. That is not what this group's about. This group is purely about the adoptee voice and lived experience, So, I talk about my experiences about gambling addiction and gang-related violence and high school violence and, sexual abuse as an infant and a teen and young adult. So all that's, talk also about the LGBTQIA plus community as well. Like it's all a part of everything. It's all a part of life. And, there are no taboo topics. And parents need to know everything, all the tough questions. And, I am a part of a lot of other groups, and when parents ask questions, the adoptees just shoot them down. And you can't learn in that environment. You just can't do it.
I think you're doing great stuff, Vin, and I encourage people to check out the group and find out more. Thanks for coming on and sharing such a great perspective on this, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure the listeners will do too.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed the conversation too.
Cheers. Thank you, listeners. Bye-bye.